Syria's military has declared the end of the ceasefire brokered by Russia and the United States, saying that it was violated too many times. The Syrian army says that the troops presented a real chance to stop the bloodshed, but terrorist groups violated it over 300 times. Syria has pledged to continue fighting terrorism in order to restore security and stability to the entire country. Russia had earlier warned that the Syrian government's unilateral observing of the ceasefire was pointless. Moscow has also been informed by Washington that it's very hard to separate the U.S. militants from the al-Nusra Front terrorists. Russia has predicted that the U.S.-backed militants will merge with terrorist groups. James Jatras is a former U.S. Senate foreign policy analyst who joins us to tell us his thoughts on this. James Jatras, it's a carefully worded statement coming from the Syrian army, and I'd like to find out from you. They have said that the ceasefire is over, but it was over. 7 days was the time limit, up for renewal, I guess. So does that mean that we're in a gray area right now? Because they haven't expanded more, except saying that it really didn't prove to be as successful as they had hoped it to be.
I think we are in very much in a period of uncertainty, and frankly, a lot of people were skeptical about the prospects for this ceasefire in the first place, and I think this strike on the Syrian army position that killed 62 Syrian soldiers, it's reported, may very well have finished off what was already a very shaky ceasefire, and frankly, I think a lot of people are suspicious that this was not quite the accident that Washington says it was, that maybe the purpose of this was to sink the ceasefire and blame it on the Syrian side.
If the purpose was to sink the ceasefire, did U.S. calculations include the reaction that might follow? Because at this point, we're looking at 62, at a minimum, Syrian soldiers to have been killed. I would guess that in the Russian camp, they must be contemplating some type of reaction.
Well, I think the reaction is going to be more in the strategic direction. I don't think they will take any action against U.S. forces, for example, but I do think it means that if all bets are off now and the ceasefire is going to break down, I think we will see a major offensive to take East Aleppo away from the terrorists. And that is really what is necessary to make a strategically important shift in this war. I don't know. There's so much confusion going on here with all the various different parties, and even on the American side, the rift, for example, between the CIA and the Pentagon supporting different factions within Syria. It's hard to know that there's any kind of coherent calculation behind the American side, and I think that the Russians are aware of this.
Well, one of the things that is somewhat deducted by the attack on the Syrian army in that area of Deir al-Zor is that that was a small parcel of land that they had under their control, the rest being under the so-called FSA. And if they were to be eradicated from that area, then that whole area would be open for the U.S. and its forces or its so-called FSA to take over and partition off Syria. That is said to be one of the aims that the U.S. may have had behind this strike that killed the Syrian army forces. Do you think that is a result that the U.S. was after?
I don't know. It would be a speculation to that effect. I can't rule it out, obviously. There's also reports that the Turks are considering expanding their zone. On the other hand, let's remember that the area where the strike took place was not one, as I understand it, where the FSA was active, but rather DAESH. And in fact, that Syrian base was under assault by DAESH at the time the strike took place. And some people even saw it as, in effect, American air support, and now we understand British air support for DAESH. So I don't know that that necessarily fits into that speculation about the FSA expanding its zone, but you can't rule that out.
Well, exactly, that being a confusion is something that Russia has said as being the main issue of this ceasefire, that you can't, I guess what they have called the non-jihadist rebels. I'm quoting one of the Russian colonels. The main issue was that non-jihadist rebels had not been separated from Syria's former al-Qaeda affiliate on the ground. Is that what, do you see, are you in agreement with Russia's statement there?
I think the idea of separating non-jihadist rebels, and frankly, I'd like to know who they are in the first place. What non-jihadist rebels? Separating them from Daesh, separating them from al-Nusra, separating them from the overwhelming majority of the anti-government forces that are some variety of Wahhabists is probably an impossibility, and everybody knows that it is. Why the U.S. side promised to do that in the first place when I think, frankly, they had no intention and no ability to do so is an open question.
Thank you very much for that. James Jatras, former U.S. Senate foreign policy analyst there talking to us.